I'm going along, and all of a sudden, there's just running tracks everywhere. And I'm sitting there, I've got my head down. I'm trying to make sense of it. And in the back of my head, I can hear my dad saying, "Get your head out of your ass. You're there." And so I pick my head up and start still hunting. And all of a sudden, here comes a doe running back down over the shelf, kind of quartering towards me. And I'm like, "Oh, that's a doe." And I hear a grunt.
Welcome to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails. I'm your host, Travis Williams. I'm sitting down tonight with Mark Head and his... Hello, Marky Mac.
Hello, how's it going?
And his buddy, Tim Nolin.
Hi there.
Tim, how are you?
I'm great.
Thanks for making the trip over. You
Yep.
live in Ossipee?
Yep.
So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how you and Mark kind of got to know each other.
All right. Well, I grew up on a working farm in Moultonboro. It's been in my family for about 100 years now. Growing up, it was still really active. We did beef cows, we did sugar and a lot of hay, big gardens, Christmas trees, logging, firewood with my grandfather. And, it was the best possible childhood, really. I mean, it at least from my perspective, it can't get any better. We still have the property. It's in the family. My mother and her siblings own it. We don't farm anything anymore. The fields are still getting cut for hay, and then I mow the pastures. We gave up sugar in here,
12, 15.
10 years ago, maybe. It just got to be too much trying to do that. And about 3,000 taps, so a pretty good-sized commitment. But trying to do that outside of a full-time job was just too much. Mm-hmm. But grew up there, went to college up in Maine, Unity, real small school in Waldo County. Went there for forestry. Moved back here in 98, and have lived in Ossipee ever since. Work as a forester. Started working for the company when it was in Chicorowa, Forest Land Improvement. And in 2020, the last of the people that started it retired, and I took over ownership. Manage timberland, act as a landowner's agent, forester. We have about 50,000 acres we manage in Maine and New Hampshire. And, that's about it. I met Mark. When did you start working for us? 2000. Yeah, and then you got done, 2018, 19? So knew him for quite a while. Taught Mark how to log.
Yeah, there's some stories there that probably shouldn't get told.
Well, it's funny. Mark taught me how to log.
I guess.
Or should I say, taught me how to cut down a tree.
Yeah. Showed you the correct way to do it.
Yeah. Mark worked. He was fresh out of high school. He was just... You weren't even 21 yet when you come to work for us.
I think I just turned 21, maybe.
Yeah, and he and I hit it right off. We started hunting and fishing together pretty regular right off the bat, and here we are, 25 years later.
Right.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot of. Obviously, you and I have chatted some, Tim, but I've heard a lot of stories where me and Tim and I, and then Tim and I did this, and Tim and I did that. So it's pretty cool. So you guys both are in logging. And a question I always like to ask people, and we had Mark and John on recently, is, do you feel like working in the woods is kind of like an advantage when it comes to your hunting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the woods, most days, all day. And just being in the woods and being used to looking in the woods for me helps, because if you're interested in hunting, if it's all you think about, like it is for us there, even when I'm in there, I may be, like today, I'm painting wood to be cut. I'm constantly looking at deer sign and thinking like, look at how they're running on this shelf, or look at this old rub from last year up on top of the hill. And you're always thinking about it. And for me, I think I never get out of the habit of it. I'm in the woods, so I'm constantly looking and thinking. And the other good thing is I trudge around in the woods for a living, so even as big as I am, I stay in hunting shape. I mean, look at me. I'm built for trudging and dragging.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's the guy you want to call for the listeners that can't see him. You want to call Tim when you drag a buck out of the woods.
Well, we always had a joke going. If we ever got hurt out in the woods, I was going to have to field dress Tim to get him out.
Yep. My dad used to say that about my grandfather. Yeah.
So you obviously grew up in a family where hunting was quite the heritage.
Oh, yeah. My grandfather was hell on deer. And him and my dad, they're all dead, so we can say this. But, I mean, that man, we had a lot of beef cows. And, you know, my mother grew up on the farm, and they didn't eat much beef, but they ate a lot of red meat. And, you know, all through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right up into the 80s, you know, he hunted a lot. And, you know, everyone in his family got a deer every year. He had a camp right up against the National Forest. Him and a few other guys bought it in the late 50s, early 60s. It was an old, like a wagon or something that they, you know, parked in one spot and turned into a camp. But it was the only time, you know, he hunted around home here, but he didn't like it as much because, you know, it's hunting on the farm, and it's a big farm. At the time, it was still about 800 acres. But, you know, he always said, you know, it's one thing to shoot deer down here, but it's not relaxing. It's not hunting, because everywhere he looks, he's saying, oh, geez, that fence needs to be mended, or this, that, or the other. So he'd go up to camp, and they'd hunt up in the National Forest, him, my dad, and a group of guys. And, you know, when I first started hunting in the 80s, they still had the camp. And so I started hunting up there in the late 80s, and, you know, it's country that I still hunt in. You know, that's, 30 years or 40 years. Yeah, I don't know. Time flies. It's been a long time, but, you know, there's country that I can remember being up there, and, you know, even before I was, you know, carrying a gun myself, being up in there, you know, with them when they shot deer and that. And then, you know, they knew that country so well, because you know how it is in the National Forest, there's not a lot of deer, but you figure out where the deer travel through the big woods. And it's funny that even this long down the line, the deer still travel in the same spots. You know where to go to pick up a track. You know where to go. Or if you move some deer, if you got 2 or 3 guys hunting up in there, you can say, well, you run all the way up this ridge back 3 or 4 saddles, and I'm going to swing down here and swing up around this side of the mountain, and if I bump something, odds are it's going to go through that saddle way up in there. And, you know, it's funny how they don't change much, how they travel in a piece of woods.
I think it goes to, if you spend the time in the woods and you start learning how deer travel, they're always going to travel the same shelves, the same routes, you know, the path least resistance. And
for sure,
that's never going to change. It's always going to be the same.
You know, and I can just imagine listening to you talk, like, because you spend so much time in the woods, like, I feel like I spend a lot of time in the woods, but it's a fraction of the time that you spend in the woods. And I can tell you for myself, I can be antler hunting, hiking, just going for a walk in the woods, scouting or hunting, and come up on that shelf or that pinch point or that whatever and go, it's going to be a scrape right here.
You know it when you see it. You're just like, this is the spot that they move. This is where they travel.
And to you, it's got to be to that 10th degree, because you're spending that much more time. You're that more in tune with your environment. It's like people used to say to me all the time when I was a guide. I used to say, listen, because I'm a fishing guide doesn't mean I have like superhuman powers, because people felt like, oh, you're a guide, you must know something that I don't. But what I did have was time on the water, day in and day out. I just knew when the fish were going to bite, where and on what, and that was just time.
Yep.
So I think that's what I've heard, a commonality amongst loggers, woodsmen in general, people that work in the woods, is that time that you spend in that environment. You just pick up little things. And there's probably things you pick up that you don't even know you're picking up.
Mm-hmm. You're constantly in tune with it because you're just there every day. It's not something you're thinking about, you know, consciously, but you're always looking.
Yeah, it just becomes instinctual at that point. It's like muscle memory.
Right. you're almost becoming part of nature again.
Have you ever been like worked on a job or done you do anything for National Forest at all, or is it all local?
No, it's private landowners. I do a lot of work for municipalities. I think 9 or 10 different towns. I manage their town land. I do a ton of work for land trust and conservation groups.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like I do a lot of work for the Nature Conservancy in the Carroll County area out of that office. I do a bunch of work for the Forest Society, different land trusts, Lakes Region Conservation Trust, Upper Saco Valley Land Trust, Moose Mountain Regional Greenways. So I mean, I like working for a lot of groups like that. I actually, for I don't know, probably 15 years, I was on the board of directors of a small land trust in Ossipee, and in 2020, I guess we merged with another, or were absorbed by a larger land trust, just because we were an all-volunteer board and just got more than we could handle. Most of the members on the board were fairly old, and I now just sit on the Stewardship and Lands Committee. I'm off of a board of directors, so that's a good thing.
Right.
But yeah, I've and something for the last probably 25 years. I was chairman of my town conservation commission for a while in the early 2000s. It's something that I believe pretty strongly in, is land protection and land conservation. It's pretty critical to what I do for work. So, I put in a lot of volunteer time on that end, but I enjoy working for a lot of those groups as well. It's a stable land ownership. I have a ton of private land I manage, and there's nothing worse than, the people that you've put 30 years worth of work into their property. You've managed it. You've done a couple really responsible harvests. Next thing you know, someone dies, the kids sell it, and it's got houses growing on it. It's like, well, so much for all that.
Yeah, we had, I don't know if you listened to all the episodes of Northwoods, but I recently had Mark Beauchesne on.
Yep.
And we talked about some of the habitat fee and what, some of those funds go toward.
Yep.
And it's something that I'm super passionate about. I'm glad you brought it up. Northwoods we are what we are right now, but hopefully we grow. And my passion in this whole endeavor, to be honest with you, is conservation. And it's conservation for land, but to keep it open. Mark and I have talked about it a lot. How we like to hunt. Like you just said, your grandfather doesn't like to hunt around because he sees the fence that needs mending. The same happens to me. Work emails.
Yeah.
And I love my wife dearly, but I come home and it's, hey, babe, can you help me fold the laundry? We have to do this. What about this bill? When you go to camp, you are immersed in the thing that you're doing. Yeah. And the thing that you're doing is hunting. And my personality is such that my brain doesn't stop. And the only real connectivity and presence that I really, truly ever have is when I'm in nature. And more specifically, when I'm tracking a buck. And big woods hunting, all of it, but specifically tracking for me because you're so engaged in that thing. And what does that take? It takes land, and a lot of it. So for all the listeners out there that don't know about the habitat fee, that don't understand conservation and what it all is, keep listening to Northwoods, because there's going to be a lot more conversation on it, and we're going to try and generate some funds to be able to protect the resource.
That's spectacular. That's
I'm
great.
super passionate about.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to, if you're going to dive into that going forward, I'd love to be a part of the conversations about it, because, it's something, like I said, I'm pushing 30 years into it at this point, and, I'm pretty passionate about it. And
so when you're doing some of this land management, have you ever been like on a piece of land and been like, I'm going to come back here and then use some of that information and harvest a buck? Or you?
Oh God, yeah. We call it work hunting. I don't know, maybe like, oh God, I don't know how many deer I've shot at work. Quite a few. I got one in Maine 2-3 years ago. I was cruising a piece of land, and a cruise is doing the inventory work. And so you're running transect lines, and every so many feet you're taking a sample point. So I had my clipboard in my left hand and my gun in my right, and I'm going along. And it was in a unit I had a doe tag for. And a deer popped up out of this thick softwood regen, took 2 or 3 bounces. I dropped the clipboard, picked the gun up, and I just said, next time he comes up out of that softwood, when I get that arc, I'm going to let him have it, because he was fairly close. And I wasn't sure if it was a buck or doe, and I didn't care because I had a doe tag. I just said, whatever this is getting shot. I folded it up. It ended up being a nice little 7-pointer.
Awesome.
So, yep. And it was one of those things where it's like, well, guess I'm not going to finish this up today. Yeah. Actually, and then the very next year, I checked on that timber sale I had going over there where Bruce and Dave were working in the morning, and took my gun for a walk up on the mountain after I painted some wood for them and shot a nice buck up in there. So
You got that one there on Turkey Street.
Oh, yeah, that's
That
right.
was
We
years
pulled
ago.
that out with a skidder. I
Skidder,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, we were showing this other kid, Chris, there that worked for us. It was a lot. We were actually doing some scarifying, not so much logging it. We'd already cut it in the summer. And we had a scarifying drag that we'd pull behind the skidder for exposing mineral soil. It's really good for getting pine regeneration. So I was walking Chris around, showing him the areas that we needed done. And it was in November. It was the last day of muzzleloader season, that Tuesday, and jumped up a really nice buck who was bedded down with a doe, and they took off. I didn't have my gun with me. It was back in the truck. So we went back. I grabbed my gun and went back out there, and I got fairly close to where I thought they were. And I blatted a couple of times like a fawn or I don't know how to describe it, like a doe bleed, I guess. I call it like a calf blat from living on the farm. But anyway, and a different buck. It wasn't as good as the one I saw, but a nice little, was it a 6 or an 8?
6 or an 8, small 8.
Yeah, I don't remember. He came charging down the hill. I'm assuming he had just lost out on that doe, and he thought maybe there might have been another one there, but he ran down the hill. Like, I couldn't believe that it was working. When I heard the deer coming, I'm sitting there going, that can't be a deer coming. There's no way in hell. It came running down the hill right to me. I was like, well, that'll work. Boom. And, yeah, the skidder was right there. We were able to go hitch it up and drag the thing right up.
So the interesting part about that is it wasn't a tipper can or anything. You did it with your mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the noise that I make is what, like a calf cow, not a deer or anything,
Right.
but the noise that a calf cow makes when it's calling for its mother is what I kind of associate those tipper cans to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've been making that noise my whole life, just screwing around with the cows. So there we go.
Yeah, one thing that I've picked up listening to some of these podcasts, and not just the Northwoods podcast, but other podcasts like the Elmer Boys and some of the others, is a lot of guys do quite a bit of mouth calling stuff, and I feel like I need to do more of it. I tend to go quiet. Usually I'm tracking a buck and I'm like trying to be quiet. I don't want them to know I'm there, so I don't always think of it. I do blow and I do blat like after I jump them, but I don't do a ton of calling, which makes me think maybe I got to dabble a little bit more in that.
I don't do a ton of the whatever that noise is, bleeding or whatever you'd call it. But in the last couple of years, I started screwing around with a grunt tube a little bit when I'm still hunting. And I started doing it only when I could see a deer, just to see what their reaction was. And, and I'm not a great caller or anything, but they're interested in it. Like the first time I did it, I could see a deer and I grunted a bit, and it wasn't a big buck or anything, but he was real interested and kind of came wandering over. And I would say I've probably, 3 or 4 deer have come to me from grunting. They've never been a big one. It's always been smaller bucks that I think are just, interested, and they come sneaking in. The only thing that I've ever called that literally came charging in was that one up there, and I think that was just that set of circumstances right there where there was a hot doe, a bigger buck had her all cordoned off, and he thought maybe he was going to run right in and find something else, and he was in a hurry, I guess.
Right. So I want to dive into a story, and I've got one teed up in my brain because I don't remember what year it was, but I remember Mark called me, and we hunt a similar area. you and I, as it may be,
Yep.
which is, it's a small world. The woods get smaller and smaller. It's like, you get out in some of these pieces and you're like, I'm the only one that's going to be hunting here because you're so deep. And then it's like, I get a text from Mark. Yeah, Tim shot a buck there last year. But let's hear that one. You know, the one I'm talking about. I'm not going to name any spots, but there's a big river near there.
You had to drag it
yeah.
you hurt your back.
Jesus Christ, yes. All right. So that was the culmination of the best 3 days of hunting I've had in my life. It was early in the main season. You know how sometimes, depending on the calendar, main season can start like October 26th or 7th.
Like last year. This year it's going to start late.
Yeah. So we had got snow, like a foot of snow on the Sunday between Residence Day and main season opening. And my buddy Dana and I went up there and we got the worst motel room ever. But we went up on Sunday, and getting up to where there we had to go up over this pretty good elevation road. And, the snow was deep enough up top. We were dragging pumpkins trying to get up through. We had to stop and cut trees and that. We got down there. And so we hunted, and it was perfect because the temperature stayed like 31 degrees. So the snow never really melted. It didn't crust. It just stayed like
The way it
just
felt,
perfect.
yeah.
But so we hunted one piece, and this is National Forest. But we hunted one piece. One day we both ended up tracking a buck. I don't think either one of us got a look at it that first day on Monday, but just ran ourselves ragged, good day. The next day I saw, hands down, the biggest bodied buck I've ever seen in my life, and frigged up on it because way back in there, and I see a doe and it go, and my first thought was I jumped it, god damn it. And I stopped still and I said, well, I'm clearly going to go. And Dana and I had, not walkie-talkie radios, but whatever. Not that we were hunting close together, but we were up high enough, and we had kind of a rough plan. We'd left in the morning. I was going way over this way. He was going this way. And we said at noontime, let's both try and be up high enough that we can check in and just see what's going on. And so before I did anything with those deer, I said, well, I'm just going to scoot up here a couple of knobs up the ridge, and I think that I'd be looking over towards the valley where he was, and I'll just let him know that I'm headed on this. We'll see you back at the hotel tonight. And so I did that, couldn't get a hold of him, and I come right back down to where I was standing, and those deer had run right back by me. I didn't jump them. He was chasing that doe. He went out and just did a quick little loop and came running right back within 50 yards where I was standing and headed down over the side of the mountain. If I'd just stayed there, I think they'd have run right back by me. But it was just one of those ones, body size. I mean, yeah, I don't even know. It just...
It's bigger than the one you got.
Yeah, and the one I got's the biggest deer I've ever shot.
Right.
And this was substantially bigger. What strikes me, you know how we all know this, you have images burned in your mind, and that's the image of that. For me, it was how deep it was in the chest and how long and how its belly carried all the way back through from the bottom of its chest right back to its hind end. It looked like a Hereford with horns. It really was something else. So I chased that deer that afternoon until it pitched down over the wrong side of a mountain, headed way, way away, and I just said, no, I ain't going that way.
Big hoof on him?
Oh, yeah. I mean...
You know where he's headed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, I bailed out of there, and I had probably hour and a half of daylight when I got back to my truck, and I said, well, there's this other gated, Forest Service road. I said, I'm going to just run up it a couple of miles to the end and see if there's any activity up there, thinking about the next day. And I got all the way up into the end of it. I'd crossed a couple small tracks, nothing much, but there was a big old log landing that the Forest Service had kind of maintained as a wildlife opening up there. And I sat down, and it's 4:00. It's getting dark. I'm absolutely whooped. I'm having a sip of water, and I think I was eating a granola bar, looking out at this, probably 2-acre wildlife opening. And when I say that, kind of brushy, raspberry bushes, that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, here comes this bear walking out into it. Not a big bear, maybe 150 pounds. And I had a bear tag, but I had no interest in shooting that far back that late in the day. And so it walks out in there. And actually ended up getting a video of it. I got up and I walked closer to it, and then they had piled up some rocks there, and that bear climbed up onto that rock pile, and by that point I'd walked up to where I was 50, 60 yards from it, and that bear's looking back down the bottom of that edge, kind of in the direction I'd come up. And I hollered at him. I was like, hey, bear. And finally he whipped his head around and off he went. And I was like, well, that was pretty darn cool. And so I went back and kind of got organized, and I start walking right back down the same road I'd come. Well, it turns out while I was sitting there dicking around with my phone, that bear was looking down at 3 deer, a buck and 2 does, that were standing in the road looking at me look at the bear. There was a great big hoof on it, totally different, not the deer I was chasing earlier, but there was definitely 2 does and a big old buck. And they took off running. And those tracks were not there when I walked up by 5 minutes earlier. Mm-hmm. So I just said, well, you moron. I followed that track out, but I only probably had half an hour till it was dark. And so the next morning I said, well, I'm going to go right back up in there. I drove to that gate first thing, and there was another truck parked there. I'm like, well, I'll go somewhere else. So I went down and crossed over good-sized river, and there's an old road that runs up along it. And I headed up along that road, and I wanted to get over. There's a big set of beaver flowages between that road and the mountain. And I kept bumping into that bog, trying to get across it without getting wet. And a good-sized brook, and couldn't. Finally, I got across it. As soon as I got across that, I picked up a really nice buck track, good hoof on it. And he was cruising, traveling, so I started following him, and I went not that awful far, maybe from where I picked his track up 3/4 of a mile or so. And he was gradually running up these shelves. And all of a sudden he got onto a shelf that just was full of feeding sign. There was some oaks there that had acorns. And big oaks, a lot of understory fir and hemlock and patches, where you could see real good, but then there's spots you can't see. And I'm going along, and all of a sudden, there's just running tracks everywhere. And I'm sitting there, I've got my head down. I'm trying to make sense of it. And in the back of my head, I can hear my dad saying, get your head out of your ass. You're there, And so I pick my head up and start still hunting. And all of a sudden, here comes a doe running back down over what the shelf, kind of quartering towards me. And I'm like, oh, that's a doe. And I hear a grunt. And it's like, oh, here we go. And he was following her, and she came in towards me, and then she angled away, and he was coming, and I think he saw, I couldn't see him at the time, but I'm guessing he saw that she'd angled, so he didn't come all the way down her track. He was cutting across that shelf, and I just got enough glimpses. Oh, there's plenty of horns there, and the next opening he came to, I dumped him. But that's the heaviest deer I've ever shot.
What did he weigh?
He was 211.
Field dressed.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, like cleaned and
yeah, you want to be able to open their mouth out and see out their asshole.
Yeah, I make that comment because I think there's a lot of guys that the 200-pound thing's a coveted thing, and and we all know them. The people that every deer they shoot's 200 pounds, but the three of us sitting here together have collectively shot. You sent me some pictures.
I've got 2 that are over 200,
and you've shot a pile of impressive deer. Mark's shot a pile of impressive
only
deer.
One 200-pounder.
And I've shot a few, right? I mean, I shot a handful of mature bucks, and I've got 2.
2.
You've got 2.
I got 1.
And you got 1.
Yeah. So, but that was
anecdotal data for you.
Yeah, and that was Halloween day. That was early in the season. Like, I didn't think he was going to go 200. And then the drag out. That's where the story now it gets interesting. So I knew I had to cross that beaver flowage. And I didn't want to drag him down and hit that beaver flowage and not be able to cross. So I said, well, what I'm going to do is take my gun and my coat and all that and pitch down over and find a good spot to cross, get that across, get all that lugged across, and then come back for the deer. I did that, and I ended up, it wasn't an awful spot. I brought him across a beaver dam. He slid off once. I had to wrestle him back up out of that. Got him out to this trail. And then my dad, years ago, when we hunted up in the National Forest, he built himself a cart for lugging deer. It's got front tires on motorcycles.
Yeah, dirt bike tires.
Yeah, dirt bike tires on it. My dad was a welder machinist, so I mean, it's nice. It's got brakes. And it's high enough that you can roll over stuff real good. I mean, we've carried some deer miles on it. So once I got him to this old road trail, I went back to the truck. It was about 1.5 miles. And there's one spot where they'd pulled the bridge, and it was a pretty good gully with a brook. And, of course, it was up. So I was, to get across that, I was well up over my knees in the water. Went back, got the cart, got him out there, got him loaded on the cart. And then I'm saying, geez, he might weigh more than I thought, after wrestling him up on there. Brought him out. And, of course, I get to that washed out brook, and it's probably like 10 feet, 12 feet down from the road down into that. And I'm like, I don't, so I take him off the cart, and I get him down in there. And we get washed downstream, and I get him lodged under a rock. The current took him and got him lodged. And so to get him out, I had to go farther downstream, and the gully that the brook is in is getting deeper. So I get him up, and then I'm trying to get him up the other side of this, just sliding back down. The snow's 6, 7, 8 inches deep with wet snow. Finally, I had to use ratchet straps and hook him and ratchet strap him, like come along him up the side of that bank, and got him up to the top. Went back, got the cart, waded back through the brook again, loaded him back on the cart, got the rest of the way out, and then I'm sitting there trying to get him in the back of my truck, and I am absolutely spent by this point. He'd keep pulling him up, and he'd fall back down, pull him up, fall back down. This old guy stops, and he's like, "Can I give you a hand?" And he comes over, and nothing. I was like, you're just going to hurt yourself. Finally, I managed to get him dragged up onto a bank and then drive the truck down into the ditch. I managed to get him in the truck, but that was quite a session.
Oh, you were lame for a week after that.
Yeah.
As I recall.
I've said it before, and I'm going to say it probably many more times. The suffrage is what. The more you suffer, the harder the hunt was, the more rewarding it was. And then when you have it all culminate,
yeah,
that's probably what led to 3 of the best days of hunting of your life. And then to shoot the deer.
Absolutely.
The big boy. And so would you say you do quite a bit of tracking? Is that your preferred method? Or
not nearly as much as you guys do, just because I don't go up north as much as you do. I hunt mostly, Carroll County, Oxford County, lower Oxford County. I mean, don't get me wrong. If it snows, I track, and I've shot deer track. And that year I ended up getting my New Hampshire deer tracking as well.
Right. That was that picture of all of us in Flap Shop there.
Yeah, that's right.
Year.
And that one, I mean, that same year, what was that, 187?
That was a rack buck too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't do as much tracking. I do more still hunting just because I don't have the snow. But given the opportunity, I certainly do. Yeah. This year I did a fair little bit. I got my Maine buck tracking. I chased a lot up in Maine. We had some pretty good snow, actually. But anyway, I was headed somewhere. Oh, what I was going to say is that was Halloween Day, third day of the season. I shot that. It went 211. The other deer I got over 200 pounds was the last Sunday of New Hampshire season. So that's generally like the 4th, 5th, 6th of December. He went 205, and you look at his body was way bigger. I mean, there was nothing left of him, no fat, just completely spun right out and still went over 200 pounds.
Length makes a difference.
Yeah.
It really does.
Long way up.
The one I killed this year in Maine, he only weighed I don't even remember now, was it 181?
Yeah, it was
180 something. But that deer laying there, like before I took his guts out and stuff, he was so long. And I'm like, man, if I'd killed him, in October or early November, you got to think, I used to do some MMA stuff, jiu-jitsu, and I used to train with these guys that would cut 30 pounds in a month. When you dehydrate your body, I wonder how much, and I think I've said this in a past podcast, but I wonder how much these deer, it's dehydration. I mean, how many times are you tracking a buck and they go over to a brook and start drinking?
Never.
No, not very.
Never.
No.
They just go and go and go. They don't eat. They don't drink. And you can tell by their frame, and that's why, like I say to people all the time, listen, I want to shoot 10 200-pounders. It's been my goal since I was a kid. It's still a goal. I'm leaning more towards the racks as I get older. The bone that goes in the wall lasts a lifetime. The meat that goes in the freezer lasts a season. But I think that a lot of these mature bucks that we're shooting, they're in the 170s and 180s in October and early November. They probably were 200 pounds.
Oh yeah.
So they're all trophies in my mind.
Yep.
The hunt's the trophy for me, like that.
Exactly.
And I know where you killed that deer, and that's some rugged country for the listeners that, don't know. It's when he says he was in a ravine. I'm pretty sure I know the ravine, and that's a real one.
Yeah, it was so disheartening because I was dragging him across, and I lost him to the current, and he got swept downstream and lodged up underneath that rock. I'm watching, and it's like, I'm screwed. Like I could see it happening. It was just like, this isn't good.
How are we going to resolve this problem?
Yep.
You guys ever drug any bucks out together?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm there for all of his shitty drags, and he's there for none of mine.
I got some buddies that say the same.
That's not necessarily how it plans out.
How many miles was that deer? 3.5 miles?
Yeah, we use the
Oh,
car.
we don't speak of.
Bro, bleep that out. Beep, beep.
Yeah. But yeah, that was 3.5
That was
miles.
3.5. That deer scored 144.
Yeah.
7
That was my dad Mark and I were out there
Is
all.
that your one or his?
mine. I
Yours.
was that one.
That was that big tall eight?
Tall eight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a nicer deer.
I was out there lower down on the hill. It's a beautiful ridge that if you can get way out there, you can run it back with the wind in your face and with bare ground. And I was down kind of at the base of it where there's some swamps and some hemlock, and he was up quite a ways up the ridge, more or less running parallel back for that few miles. And my dad was in, mile or so from the road. Yeah. And Mark shot, and there is cell phone service there. And I called my dad up, and he says, I heard that shot and knew how far out there we were. He says, I almost shut my goddamn phone off. So he ended up going back and getting that same cart we're talking about.
The slaying cart.
The slaying cart. And we loaded that thing on. I mean, the problem is he shot it up on this wicked steep ridge, and we couldn't just bring it right straight down the ridge because there's a big scree slope, and if you made it through that, you'd be right in the swamp. So
Well, I can remember hooting a bunch trying to get you up there, and you finally got up there huffing and puffing, and he's like, I got stuck in that scree slope.
Yeah, I know where he's at. I can hear him, but I'm trying to get up through this rock scree slope, and I have to keep switch back and climbing up. And I got up to him. I said, we're not dragging it downhill. So we had to drag it side hill for probably 3/4 of a mile before we could pitch down over. It was so steep that we ended up tying my dragging rope onto the tail of the deer, and I was at the ass end of it, keeping the deer from sliding downhill while he pulled it forward. That was a good time.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't that a super long drag, too?
Well, to get him out of the woods, it was, 3.5 miles.
That's a super long drag.
But we had the cart, the slaying cart.
For the last couple miles, it was rolling.
Does this cart still exist?
Oh, yeah.
We need to get a picture of that thing. I got to see that.
Yeah. It's a slick rig.
Yep.
Sounds it.
And then the other one that was over 2 miles was that one with the lobster claw front on its antler. Yep. That was late in the year.
Yeah, that was probably my best hunt I've ever had, my most memorable.
Well, let's hear it. Let's dovetail this thing together.
All right.
So, I'll weigh in when we get to the shitty drag part.
So, it was that week I took off. I always took that last week off.
Yep.
So it was the last week of December.
And I was done hunting, right?
Yeah, you were at work. I always took that Thanksgiving to the end of the season off. And must have been the last Wednesday of the season. It was getting down there in time. And we had some horrible snow for tracking, but I was going to track. So I tracked this.
It was crusty, right?
Crusty. It was like walking on light bulbs. And I ended up tracking this deer all day. And I bumped him up, and I'd bump him up. And I was, he'd follow him. He'd slow down. Tracks would get tighter together. And I'm like, all right, he's going to be laid down on this bench up here. And I'd start sneaking. But you can't sneak in crust that goes smash, and you hear the chunk sliding down the hill.
Tink, 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 tink,
Yeah,
tink, tink.
yeah. You're not sneaking through that. And I'd get close, but I'd never see him, but I'd hear him take off. And I said, well, it's getting late in the day. This next time I get close to him, it's going to be my last opportunity. So I got to do something different. And I said, I'm just going to walk. Just keep on walking. I got to do something.
Crunch up on them.
Crunch up on him, yep. So that's what I ended up doing. And I don't know if I bumped him or what, but he was coming back down along this little seasonal drainage. And he didn't get much further once we crossed paths. And I don't know, it was right after 3:15 in the afternoon.
I was just getting ready to leave work
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and he sends me a picture of it dead and GPS coordinates. And I'm like, all right, I'm coming. And I got to the gate. There's a gated road that goes at the base of this mountain. And I got to the gate, and I had my GPS unit, and he sent me another set of coordinates based on how far he managed to drag it. And I put him in a straight line. It was like 1.78 miles in a straight line. And I'm looking at him like, we're not going in a straight line.
And I've been dragging on this deer for half hour, 45 minutes already.
And it's getting dark. So I started hoofing, and I got up in there I made good time.
You made good time. You were,
Yeah. And I got up in there, and we muckled onto that thing. And it was another one where you couldn't just bring him out straight. We had to bring him down the hill and then pick that road up.
Go side hill and out.
Yeah, Jesus. It was well dark.
Yeah. It was, for me.
But, I mean, between the two of us, we
wasn't
muckle
bad.
onto something we can drag.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Lean
It's
into
coming
it.
out.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it was the most rewarding hunt I've ever had. Just because at the end of the day, I was mentally and physically exhausted. Mm-hmm. Just trying to figure out, like, how am I going to connect with this thing,
Yeah, I think some of it with some of those hunts, like the one you just described, it's a mental thing too, because and a lot of people don't understand that listen to these accounts. Like when you're tracking, you're constantly thinking. You are so engaged in trying to harvest that animal that you second guess everything you did. All right, should I give him 30? Should I give him 10?
That was that one.
Okay. All right, we'll make sure to give Brooke a picture of this. That's just a little thing.
Yeah, that's that.
Like 20 plus inside?
That was 20, 22, 21 inside.
It's a giant.
Yeah.
It's a giant. So, well, I've learned Mark doesn't come running on the drags. I shot one this year, and we were hunting. We were within earshot on the radios, and he says, "You got that all right, don't you?"
Well, I asked. You're going to get that out.
In sales, we call that an assumptive close.
Right. We'll see. I'd make a good salesman, wouldn't I?
Yes, you would. Yeah, I get that buck there in New Hampshire, and I mean, in all fairness and truth, I did say, "Listen, guys, I got it." Because it was like, I think I killed him at like 11:30.
Yeah, it's like I don't care if it takes all day. Keep hunting.
I've
let everyone else go.
I've heard lots of guys say it's the most fun, hard work that you'll do, and there's nothing like being, you've got nothing else
To do.
You're just gonna muckle hold of this thing and drag it. I had to go through a couple brooks, and it ended up being a little bit more difficult, because you look on the, we use GPSs or OnX, and you're just looking as the crow flies. You're not really looking at the topography. In this particular area that I'd shot the deer, I hadn't hunted in a bunch. But it was an absolute shithole between me and where I had to go. But it was still fun, and I didn't really need help. It would have been – I like the camaraderie of it.
Yep.
Like, when your friend comes, you're enjoying that moment, that experience. And then like what you and Mark are talking about right here, you're reliving that. You have somebody to – Mark and I double teamed a couple bucks in the last couple of years. We both shot deer, I think 2 years in a row. We both got Maine and New Hampshire bucks, and we're like, let's go to Vermont. And we messed around in Vermont and just, no pressure, just chasing them around the mountains, and there's a lot of laughs.
Mm-hmm.
He'd fall, I'd laugh. I'd fall, he'd laugh. He'd go in a beaver bog.
Yep.
Stuff.
I had wounded a deer. This was, pushing 10 years ago now. And he and I were blood trailing it. And actually, I had hit it the first time and was following it. And he got out in front of it. And he got two more into it. And the thing's still going. And we're talking about laughing as we got out into this great big old beaver bog that's all grown up with swale grass and that, and you could see where the deer had crossed this brook and had gone up the other side. And I looked at him and I was like, "You think we can jump that?" And he's like, "Probably not." And I was like, "Well, I'm going to give it a go."
Here, Mark, hold my beer.
Yeah. And I looked at him. I said, "We're going to remember this." Or I said, I don't remember what I said. It was something along the lines of, "We're going to talk about this." And I didn't make it, but whatever. But I was 2/3 of the way across, so by the time I hit the water. Yeah, that deer, like I said, I hit it once. He ended up putting 2 into it. He shot 3 times, hit it twice, running out across a clear cut. And we followed that thing till dark. It was Thanksgiving Day. I messed, and we had our buddy Caleb involved with it too. So it fouled up all 3 of our Thanksgiving dinners. We had some pissed off wives.
Yeah, whatever.
And then the next day, we went back, and I got onto the blood trail again. And Mark was, I think you'd gone up to camp, but I had my buddy Dana and Caleb and his dad, and we ended up, we've never found the deer. The bleeding had come right down to just about nothing. But as part of that hunt, our buddy Dana, who hunted a little bit as a kid but had kind of given it up and he wasn't that into it, he ended up shooting his first deer that day because we had lost it in a different section of the same bog, and Caleb and I were pushing through, seeing if we could jump it up, drive it out, and we put Dana down in one spot and Blair up in another, and Caleb jumped up a really nice buck and ran it right to Dana, and he shot it, and it was his first deer ever, and we were all there, and it was so friggin' cool. And I think he's got a deer every year since then. He's hooked.
Yeah, he got hooked.
Completely hooked. It's all he thinks about and talks about now. But he was, if he's 10 years old, he was probably 35 when he shot his first deer.
No kidding.
And the excitement and just being there was one of the best things ever. And I've got another good friend of ours hunted for the first time in his 40s, and he got his first deer 2 years ago. And I don't even think I was hunting, but I was close enough by that I went over and showed him how to gut it and all of that. And I don't know, I think that was one of the coolest things. Those 2 guys, full-grown adults, but getting them to be there when they shoot there, or be, there right after they shoot it, and the excitement. That's cool. It's really cool.
It's probably the biggest thing I miss about guiding is the connectivity that you get with the hunters.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. I did some guiding with Jason Parent, New Hampshire Guide Service. I think they changed it to Northern New England Outfitters. And he had hired me to just help. He had got a client, and it was these 2 guys. They were in their 70s. God, I wish I remembered their names. And they kind of booked me as a semi-guided hunt. So they had me for a weekend, like a Saturday, Sunday, the open in New Hampshire hunt. This was back in, I want to say 2007 or 6, something like that. It was brutal. It was 70 degrees, and it was a J2 hunt. So this zone where we're in right now.
Yeah.
So not an overly
moosey
right,
zone.
It's not moose trampling. It's not like in northern New Hampshire. And I'd done a little scouting. Jason had helped me, and I was in a spot, actually, ironically, not as the crow flies too far from where we're sitting here, but we hunted hard. I pushed these guys for 2 full days. Again, in their mid-70s, older gentlemen. They were into beekeeping, honeys. They grew giant pumpkins, which remember you were into for a little bit.
I grew some, yeah.
And just salt of the earth people, and I felt so bad. We hunted so hard for 2 days, and they were feeling it after a couple of days of trudging around the woods in 70-degree weather.
Yeah.
And so we'd gone back to the truck. We were having some lunch, and I said, guys, just sit here for a minute. I'm going to take a walk. With them, I had to go really slow, and I just wanted to go run and just see if I could see something to get me excited to either give me a charge or give them a charge, just something, you know how it is.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd gone up and I did this big loop, and I cut this track that I'm telling you, man, there was smoke rolling out of it. It's bare ground, but it was just moose are big animals. When they walk in the woods, they leave spoor. And so I tracked them a little ways on bare ground, and I see a pile of poop, and I pick it up like I always do, and I taste it. No, not really. I picked it up, and it's soft. It's green. You break it up, and it's still warm. I'm like, this moose, and it's 70. They don't, as you well know, they don't go anywhere.
No.
So I run back down the trail. I'm like, guys,
Come on.
I finish up your water. I need one last push. And I back up for a second. I had given them an extra day. So I had Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Meanwhile, I was supposed to go out and help with a hunt up north. But I gave them the day on me. I said, guys, I'm giving you another day. Don't worry about any charges or whatever. And long story short, we get up there. We start tracking this moose, which obviously bare ground tracking is arduous. And I'm just picking my way, and my head's down. And all of a sudden, the moose was bedded, and he got up. And, moose aren't the fastest animals in the world, and they're pretty easy to shoot running because they don't bound like a deer.
Yeah.
And he took off, and I went, right there. And I kind of like ducked because the guys were behind me. I don't want to get shot in the back. And boom, boom, they both shoot. Actually, no, the one guy shot. And, I watched him shoot. The gun came to about his hip. He was not, line of sight, aiming. And I just see the moose disappear. And I'm like, you unsafe? He's like, yeah. I said, all right, come with me. And we go running up there. And there he lay. He'd spined him, and we end up finishing him off. And I'll never forget. It was super warm. I called my dad. He showed up with the ATV and ATV trailer because that's how we were going to get out of the woods. And, we had our little moment, high five, hugging, celebrating. And they're like, if you don't mind, we'd like to field dress the moose. It's something that we're capable of, and we'd like to do it. I said, listen, you guys get going on it. I'm going to go get my dad, he'd get some blocks of ice, get him cooled off. And so I'd gone back, met my dad, came back up, and they had finished field dressing it, which they did a good job on. And they were both hugging and like tearing up a little bit, And I'll be honest with you, I teared up a little bit. For me to have that experience with them and just see the joy and the genuine excitement and me to be the facilitator of that, I was hooked. Still am. Like, I love guiding for moose. I love guiding for anything. But so what you were just talking about with that,
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. And I think that's a profound experience when you're so passionate about a thing to then see somebody else get joy in the thing that you're so passionate about. It's undescribable, really.
Yep.
Well, I think so. My buddy John, he was the same way. Started hunting in his mid-30s or something like that, And I think you have a greater respect for it than you do if you were, 10, 12 years old and got your first animal. Not that you don't respect it, but
It's different.
it's totally different. It's, like
Yeah.
you understand the difficulty it was to get this animal and what it's going to be. It's going to be food. It's going to be, for your family for the next year. I think it's more meaningful probably.
Well, you've got a fully developed adult brain. It's not like you're an 11-year-old kid who,
Right.
I remember it as being unbelievably cool, but it's different. You're not a grown up. You're not processing things the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So you spoke of food. Do you ever eat venison?
I've been known to.
So Mark told me something, and I think he's probably misspeaking when he says this, but he claims that you ate venison, and that was the only red meat that you ate for a whole year.
Oh yeah, most years. Like, if I eat beef half a dozen times a year, I eat deer meat.
So you literally, basically eat deer meat.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome.
I do like cow. It's good and all, but I end up with freezer full of venison, so that's what I eat.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't eat much meat. Not that she objects to eating meat, she just doesn't care for it. But my daughter and I will eat 3 deer a year.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
we eat a ton. I tend to get in these little phases where I kind of like get into cooking other things. I'm like, God, I got to eat venison again. But venison is part of our diet. I had venison burgers last night.
Yeah, I had steak last night and a leftover steak sandwich for lunch today. And
so you weren't fibbing.
wasn't
The
lying.
man eats venison.
yeah,
Currently doing the carnivore diet, so
You are?
all I'm eating is meat.
There you
It's
go.
been a pretty cool experience. It was just a quick story on it. Somebody at work was chatting about it, like, "Hey, thinking about doing carnivore." And I'm like, I've listened to some podcasts and whatever. It's intrigued me a little bit, listen to Joe Rogan, and then like the next couple days later, I was at a friend's house and we were playing poker, and the guy that was there I'd met, and I didn't recognize him. He's like, "You've met me," and I'm like, "Yeah, guy, you look familiar." Anyway, he'd lost like 47 pounds, and he was doing what he called the low inflammatory diet. He had MS, and big hunter. Actually, I think I'd met him with my buddy Lance prior to. But anyway, he basically was like, the diet that I'm doing is basically a carnivore diet. I mean, I eat some fruits and select vegetables and some avocado. So that was like a couple days later. Well, then 3 days later, we have a sponsorship that we're working on with Mark Woodman of Woodman Arms, and they're making us a custom carbine 20-inch muzzleloader, which should be out soon. I'm hopeful. I call Mark all the time. Mark, if you're listening, can't wait to put my hands on one of those. But I'd called him. He just ran in the Boston Marathon, and we started chatting. And I was like, I want to give you time before I bugged you on this and just see how things are going on the new gun. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, the marathon went well. My recovery was amazing." And I'm like, "Well, what do you attribute that to?" And he's like, "Oh, I've been eating carnivore now for," I think he said, like 4 or 5 months. And I'm like, "All right, that's it. I'm going to try it." And so I've been on it now for, I think, a couple weeks will make 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I did like my blood work and stuff, and it was amazing. I feel great. My energy levels are phenomenal. I don't drink at all, which I'm sure a lot of,
It's just empty carbs.
Some of these benefits are probably because I quit drinking too. But yeah, it's been good. So I think you would be a great candidate for the carnivore diet because it sounds like you all use venison.
Well, although I will say
mashed potatoes are pretty darn good.
I know. My buddy had gotten a beef cow from his neighbor, and he gave me a couple of good steaks. We ate them, I don't know, last week or the weekend before, and you forget how good beef is. Meat with fat in it, big fat cap on it. It's like, boy, that's awful nice.
Well, I'll tell you, that's one of the things that I've noticed being on this diet is I used to kind of pick around the fat. I'd eat some, but like I'd eat with like Pete at work,
right?
Peter Weeks, deer killer himself. But I'd go, like we'd go to dinner or something, he'd get a ribeye, and he'd be like, "You're not going to eat all that fat?" I'm like, "No." Now, dude, no fat gets.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's amazing.
It's the best part.
Don't waste that.
You're at least for me, my palate's changed in that regard a little bit. But, yeah, big venison fan. So you're right. It kind of dovetails everything together because as I've gotten older, like the appreciation in today's world, I think especially knowing where your meat comes from.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Touching it. You guys process it, right? You take it over to the farm.
Well,
Mark's given up
I've
on
given
it.
up. I shoot one, give it to the butcher, and go hunting again.
Right, but you did for years.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
to be honest with you, I'd love to process my own. I'll be honest, it's my own selfish drive that makes me go drop it off at the butcher, and because you only get a month.
That's why.
And after it, I'm going to be dreaming about it for the rest of the year. So I want to capitalize on the time that I have to be able to actually physically hunt if I got to process my deer. But I would love to because for all those reasons. You harvested it, and now you're processing it.
And for me, growing up on the farm, we butchered beef cows, we butchered pigs. Right. It's just, for me, it's part of it. It always has been. From the time I was old enough to get in the way trying to help, I've been cutting up animals. And, most of our crew, and like I said, Mark's given up on it, but everyone else,
Maybe
we
I'll
still
have to come back and have a couple
we still
of
cut deer. And that's the fun part of it is, you get a couple of guys together, and generally we have, a big enough group of guys that, sometimes we get a couple to do it once and that, and it's a good time.
I think the last one we did in Graham's house there in the basement, we had that earthquake.
Oh, that's
the last
right.
one of mine.
Yeah,
we did.
that's right.
I don't know if
we thought the furnace was going to blow up. So
up.
Over at the farm, up in what was my grandparents' house, we're set up for butchering. Big industrial Hobart grinder, big long tables, freezer paper, scales, like coolers. I mean, we're set up for butchering beef cows, so this is nothing. So I do have a good situation there.
Yeah, it's pretty handy.
Yeah. I'd love to know how many deer we've cut. I mean, and not just me. I'm talking about my grandfather over the years, and how many have gone through that butchering facility there would be hundreds.
If
hundreds.
Those tables could speak. I mean, you sent me that picture of your grandfather with all those hides in the back. I mean,
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Like I said, he was hell on deer.
He put a little hurt on him.
Yes, he was. And, for as many deer as that man shot, There's not a single rack anywhere. My dad said he would cut the antlers off before he even dragged them out of the woods. If it was a buck unit, he'd leave 3-inch stubs or whatever was a legal thing. There was one set of horns that was kicking around the barn that would have filled a bushel basket that was so big even he had to keep. And I watched him sell it. It was in the fall of the year, and we had an apple orchard there, and we're selling apples. And we had just fruit stand in front of the barn and that. And some guy was in there buying apples, and he looks up. It was set up on top of this old refrigerator just inside the door of the barn that we use for storing gas cans in. And I mean, honest to God, it would have filled a bushel basket is how I would describe this
60,
rat.
70-inch deer.
And the guy was so wound up about it. And he said, "Oh, can I see that?" And my grandfather said, "Yeah, go right ahead." And he got it down. He says, "Oh, would you ever sell this?" And my grandfather's like, "I don't know. How's $20 sound?" And there it went. That was the only set of horns that ever existed from the lifetime of that man shooting deer.
And in a way, as much as as you can see, are in my house right now,
Yep.
cherish the antlers and put them on display and put a lot of work into to getting them. I kind of respect that, because I think in today's world, we're so caught up in the destination and we almost don't want the journey in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that right there describes, for him, it was the meat.
Yeah.
Probably almost all of that, right? But I'm sure there was that.
He loved it. It was
journey.
it was for him like getting up to camp and like I said, he shot plenty of deer on that farm, more than I could probably even fathom. But for him, getting for that week or two he'd spend up at camp was just, it was getting away from the farm. It was getting away from work. It was getting up into the woods, and he just loved it.
Yeah.
For me, I work in the woods all day, every day. And hunting season is the only time I get to spend in the woods when I'm not at work. And so for me, that's the difference. And I struggle at the beginning of the season to get my brain out of work mode, because I'll be walking around looking up at trees and that. And it's like, get your head out of your ass. You're hunting. You're not doing that. And it takes a minute to get going on it. But yeah, it's the only time that I'm in the woods where I'm not working.
I know people that are shed crazy at times, and I've hunted with them, and they're, I was looking for sheds. You're looking for sheds, or you're deer hunting? There's deer tracks everywhere. Come on.
Yeah, you warned me when I started shed hunting. You're like, don't become, so driven. And it's funny, man. I just shift gears.
Right.
Like, I like to look for moose antlers, but then once it's deer hunting, I'll walk over a moose antler.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I could
I
care
can't
less.
tell you how many I've found. I was just
Oh, God.
take a picture of it, and like George will look at it, and he's just like, "You didn't lug that out?" And I was like, "No, I'm deer hunting."
Maybe I'll drop a pin on it and come back, but
I
maybe not.
found a cork and moose antler tracking in the snow up north this year, and I hung it up in a tree just figuring. I mean, it was fresh. It still had blood on the tip of it and some hair. I mean, it was snowing like a son of a bitch that day, and there was snow on it, but I bet you it hadn't been there 24 hours. I meant to go back this spring and look for the other side and never got to it. But at the end of the day, I ran that deer. Actually, I ran that deer until I got into a better one, and then ran that deer until I ran out of day. And on the way back by, I'm like, it's probably only a half mile out of the way. I ended up cruising back by and picking that antler up, because I was like, I'm 4 miles from the truck. It's not going to get any easier than right now.
Yeah. What are you seeing in the woods this year? Are we going to have an acorn crop? Too early to tell.
It's hard telling.
Yeah.
Tell you, how about the beech nuts last year? I have never seen beech nuts as widespread and as thick as it was.
I couldn't figure the deer out on them, though. I feel like they weren't eating them.
That's exactly so.
They were.
What it was is they weren't focusing anywhere. They could eat one here and one there because they didn't have to go somewhere.
They're still everywhere in the woods.
Yeah. That deer I got in New Hampshire this year, we had a very spotty oak crop. And I wandered into a piece of woods that I hadn't probably set foot in 4 or 5 years. And it was a rainy morning, and I was having a frustrating beginning to the season. This is New Hampshire, bare ground still. It was kind of a rainy day. And I wasn't finding just it was a frustrating start to the year. And I stepped into this piece of woods, and there was sign everywhere. There was feeding sign, rubs, scrapes, and I was like, oh, and it's fresh. It had rained overnight, and the dirt's still up on top of the leaves and crisp. I was like, oh, here we go. And it had both acorns and beech nuts in it. And it's funny, there were beech nuts everywhere, but this was a little pocket with acorns too, and it was holding a pile of does. And he was in there just running around like nose to the ground, just back and forth. And
Sensory overload.
yeah, he just, yeah.
Like Mark when he was 18 at the bar.
Right. 21.
21.
I never
that's
went
right.
there when I was
That's
18.
right, yeah. Allegedly.
Yeah. No, I've seen acorns in the trees at my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. I pulled the binoculars out the other day and was looking at them.
So last year early, Kirsten and I had gone up where you and I hunted quite a bit, where you did a little late season looking. Same thing, beech nuts everywhere, and there was this couple shelves, and all of a sudden there was all these deer tracks. Like, you know, it's just bare ground, obviously, in like I'd say August, September. Yeah, September, and all of a sudden I literally could hear acorns falling out of the trees. You could see them; they're on the ground like marbles, and I'm like, oh my god, big 4-finger track. I was wound. Like I just found him.
Yep.
Here he is. Fast forward, muzzleloader season. I think it was the second day because the first day we hunted in that neck of the woods you described.
Oh, yeah.
With that bar on the New Hampshire end.
Yeah.
And so we went, the next day we went over there, or I went over there, and went way up on the top. It's, you know, it's a poke in there. And that's what made me so excited is I'm like, this is a mile and a half in plus.
Yeah, no one's going to drive them out of here.
No.
It's remote, and it's kind of crappy. It's mountainous and ledgy and not pleasant.
Well,
And
there isn't a lot of deer either.
there's almost no deer.
Yeah.
But there was a pocket. I'm like, here we go. Not an acorn. Every single, like, they must just all fell early, and then they all got picked up. I mean, I was walking around biting them, you know, because there was obviously old ones on the ground, but they were all junk. And I had checked the ones that were on the ground, and they were good ones in September.
Yeah. Well,
If they fall, correct me if I'm wrong, if they fall with a cap on them,
they're no good.
they're no good generally.
theoretically, yeah.
They have a worm in them, right?
Yeah.
And I've tested that theory since you told me that, and you're more often than not, you're right. Like I bite into them, and they're crap.
That that main deer I got this year, it was into a pocket. It was the same day he got his main deer. Yep. We started in the same spot. It was over in I had a timber sale planned for the area, and I'd been in there. I think I was running boundary lines ahead of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all the buck sign in here. And so Mark and I, we had fresh snow. Was it still snowing, or it just wrapped up?
It wrapped up before daylight.
So we started. He headed in his direction, ended up with his deer. I went down into this section, picked up a track. It wasn't an awful big track, but it was, you know, almost the end of main muzzleloader. I was not being fussy. If I seen anything legal, it was dying that day. And all this thick softwood, all folded over with the fresh snow. And that deer, we went around and around and around. I bumped him a few times, never see him, but I mean, I'd had to been 20 yards from him to see him in that thick stuff. Finally, I got sopping wet. I was like, the hell with this. I knew a spot 10 minutes, 15 minutes down the road where it's open woods. I was like, I know. And it's somewhere I'd hunted a bunch this year, chased some deer around in. So I ended up going over there and picking a track up. We went up over the mountain, quartering down the other side, and he finally got into a group of does feeding in the only acorns on that mountain. And it was the same thing as I was saying. I'm following the track along, and all of a sudden there's feeding and sign everywhere. And it's that, you're here, start paying attention. And sure enough, he was standing there looking downhill, and I couldn't see the does, but they were all laying down there. You could see the beds afterwards. And he was just standing there perfectly still, just watching them does. His head was behind a cluster of trees. I couldn't see horns at first. We stood there for a few minutes, and finally he spun his head around. And I said, oh, there's plenty of horns there. Boom.
What do you hunt with for a rifle?
Well, that was muzzleloader.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I've got one of those, I don't even know the name of it. It's the Thompson Center break open ones. It was
LHR.
like those LR, when they took over the patent for those LHR, or Strike, I think it's called. And it's all right. I bought it like a year before I became aware of the Woodman ones that Mark bought. And then with rifle season, I hunt On foul weather, I have a peep-sighted pump gun, and normal weather, a bolt gun. My dad passed away here in January of 23, and I hunted this year with the deer rifle that he built. Like I said, he was a welder, machinist, really a craftsman with metal. His father, when he got out of the Navy, was a gunsmith. My dad inherited all of that gun shop and the tools, and he built up a bunch of really, really nice Mauser 98 bolt-action deer rifles. And the very best one he made was his own. He built it in the late 80s. It's
Gorgeous.
a gorgeous gun.
Beautiful.
When I say he built it, it was a bare-barreled action, beautiful scroll engraving on it. But he built a banded ramped front sight on it. He did it like in, I guess you'd call it an express style, like the English safari rifles, but it's a thin stocked 30-06. He bought a blank piece of figured English walnut, carved the stock.
Oh, wow.
I can remember in the 80s, my mother coming unglued when she found out he spent $500 on a chunk of wood. And this is like 1986, when $500 is a lot of money, and we didn't have much money growing up. And but yeah, it's a work of art, and he hunted it from then until when he got too sick to hunt. But I shot that deer in New Hampshire with it this year.
That
And I
must
felt
have been something special.
Absolutely.
That's
I liked that quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Well, that's cool. So one of these days we all got to get together and shoot, because the jury's out on me with the peep, the 2022 buck that's on the wall in there. Shot at him 11 times.
I heard that story on the podcast. Yeah.
What I didn't say in the podcast, just because I didn't want it to be the focal point, was my peep was shooting and we came back here. I think you were with me.
I shot it, yeah.
And 50 yards, it was like bottom of the paper.
Oh, yeah.
So it was significantly off. I don't know if I bumped it or just didn't tighten it enough, but like to dabble. I actually just bought a 22 pump.
572.
Yep.
I've got one of them.
Yep.
What a fun little thing.
I can't wait to shoot it some more. I literally bought it. I shot it a couple times out there. It went in the safe, and I've been Mark and I.
They're fun. I'm a big fan of that. But I'm pretty good with the peep. I've shot, 3 or 4 deer with it now. And I just use it when I don't want to deal with the scope being fouled up with snow.
So good. It's like, man.
Yeah.
It's hard, yeah.
It's hard to not want to hunt with them when they carry like that. And the reason I asked is you were talking about seeing the deer and the antlers, and do you hunt with the peep? So I'm glad, you hunt with the peep, because
sometimes, like I said, foul weather, rainy days, snowy days. Sometimes if I know I'm going to hunt some really thick stuff. But for my entire life, I've hunted with a bolt gun with a scope.
Yep.
My dad built me, when I was 12, he built me a 30-06. And then I ended up picking up a really nice 270 that I hunted with for probably 15 years, shot a pile of deer with. I tell you what, I'm impressed with that caliber. That makes 2 holes in anything you shoot with it.
270.
Yeah. Really very happy with that. And this was the first year I went back to a 30-06 with my dad's gun. And yeah.
You're running partitions in it.
Yeah.
Of course.
Obviously, hand load partitions. And
that's part of our big plan with this new Woodman, is to not just, say here's another option for a shorter, lighter carbine, which I don't know if you've held his.
Like I said, I bought this muzzleloader. I finally broke down and spent money and bought a decent muzzleloader like a year before I became aware of Woodman's, and I'm too cheap to just buy another one. Yeah.
Well, we'll see if maybe we can't give you a deal on one, but I'll tell you, man.
They're slick.
Oh my God, are they slick?
I've shot his. Our friend Dana's got one. They're the way to go.
They carry so good, and that's the thing. The way it balances, because that's what I love my bar. I've got a 308 Browning LL Cody bar, the little shorted Cerakoted. I killed my big 8 with that because my pump, the wood had split. Remember that year?
Yep.
And I was just nervous about it, like coming apart in the woods. And so I'd taken my bar that day. And I love that, but I've got small hands in the way that I carry it.
They're pretty blocky.
I kind of got to do, it's like a forearm pump by the end of the day, the way you got to carry it. And the thing with the pumps are how they balance. When you hold them at that pump point, and that's what I mean, there's many things about the Woodman that I like, but
you can hold that Woodman with one finger on that hinge point, and it balances perfect.
And that's what I'm hoping that we get that balance point with the carbine, or not hoping, we're going to get that balance point. And then the other thing that I want to get in like Ryan's hand and obviously Timmy and Mark's in 2 holes. Oh, yeah. So I want to design a load and the cartridge, which Mark does, to not just be the gun, but here's the recipe.
Yeah.
Here's the gun, and here's the 2-hole tracking.
That's been my biggest gripe about muzzleloaders is just not getting a couple holes, not getting good blood. It's been frustrating.
It's so important, the way we hunt, to get 2 holes in a deer.
Yeah.
Just so you have that good blood trail. You gave me those.
I got to pee.
Yeah.
Pause. Brooke, pause. All right, Brooke, the pee break is over. We're back. Yeah, so, I think having kind of the full recipe, because let's face it, people like Mark and Timmy Bolduck, that's what they do, right? It's like your dad. He built the great gun because he's a mechanical engineer and works with that sort of stuff. Me, I'm a salesman. I'm fortunate to have some buddies like Mark and Ryan who do hand loads and stuff. But I kind of want to take all the guessmanship out for the average guy like myself. And when you pick one up, here's the recipe. This is what you want to shoot, 100 grains by volume. Here's the bullet. We've R&D'd it. We've shot it. It's going to make 2 holes. This is a tracking muzzleloader for a specific thing. So excited. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, those Woodmans are sweet.
Yeah, they are. You guys run the 45 caliber one like Dana, right?
I got 45.
Yeah, I got a 45. We'll dig it out of the safe before you leave.
I really wish that. Like I said, I missed it by a year.
Yep.
But
I don't think I'd switch and go to a 50. Not that I have a problem now, because I just buy Woodman's bullets there that they supply. But if you were to go to like Walmart or something like that, it's hard to find 45 caliber projectiles.
oh yeah, for sure.
Components are tough these days.
I'm trying to remember. I bought some bullets for my muzzleloader because I was pretty unhappy with the results I was getting with it. And I've shot a few deer with it now. I think the name was maybe Precision. It was somewhere from out west. I don't know. But they're better but still not where we want.
You were using those 300 grainers there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I had Nosler muzzleloader bullets, 300 grain, and they just punish you to shoot. I had to
knock your fillings out.
Yeah.
I got a buddy that's kind of doing he was on the podcast, Jamie Savage. He was on once, and then he's got that double teaming video on the channel. Him and his buddy Kyle there killed 2 bucks at the same time. I don't know if you've seen that video. It's pretty good. Yep. It's on our YouTube. But Jamie's been exploring with the big heavy grain muzzleloader stuff, trying to brush cut. And I got to imagine those 300 grain bullets going a little slower would be more. No.
If it hits something, it hits something. You get a
deflection's deflection.
Yeah. Well, we know that happens because
we talked about it in the last one.
I missed a buck, and Mark was like, "We're gonna go back and we're gonna go there," and we literally saw the limb that it hit, and it literally deflected. I mean, several inches.
Oh, I can't think how many trees I've shot over the years.
There's Timmy 2 trees down there.
Yep. I had one, I hit 2 different trees shooting it. I didn't get that deer at all, but I found 2 spots where there was big cuff marks out of the side of trees.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
What's this story? I know Mark mentioned to me one time something about shooting a coyote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was actually, this is something that, thank goodness there were witnesses.
Yeah, you never would have.
So we were hunting, us and, was it Dana was with us, right?
You and Dana, yeah.
And it was fairly early in the season. It was definitely rifle season. It wasn't muzzleloader, but it was.
I tagged out. I was carrying my shotgun bird hunting.
That's right. You were. Yeah. And we were hunting this piece of woods. I had logged up in there probably 3-4 years before that. And there was still some decent open skid roads. It was just right. And there's this great big old beaver bog, a lot of open water. I mean, when I say a big beaver bog, probably
5-6 acres.
Yeah. And we had come down to the edge. It comes down on one side of it, heavy to woods right to the edge of the water. And we're looking out over it, and there's just a skim of ice on it. And on the far side, way out across there, it's all cattails coming out and grass and that. And all of a sudden, we hear this crash, crash, crash racket. And here comes a deer running out from the other woods, out through all that with a coyote chasing it. And it went out onto the ice and broke through the ice into the water. And that coyote went in after it and was right on that deer's back, biting it at the back of its neck. And the three of us were just sitting there looking like, holy shit, do you see this?
Imagine if you had a video camera going.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Like Marty Stauffer's Wild America right there.
Right.
And it's a ways off. And I was just like, well, the hell with it. And I pulled my gun up and shot. I hit the coyote offhand.
It was coming up. The deer had gone up out of the water.
It was trying to crawl up the banking, and that coyote is on its back, pulling it, just biting at it and thrashing. And I'm just offhand. I just said, well, screw it. I'm going to take a poke at it. And I shot, and boom, coyote goes down. Deer goes back in the water. Deer swam around. The deer ended up getting out. But using the GIS computer at work, you can pull up some really good air photos, and you can see where we were standing because it's one shore, and you can see on the air photos, you can zoom right in and measure.
It's better than Onyx.
Oh yeah, this is what I use for my forestry mapping. It's pretty wild what you can do, but you can measure distance. It was 230 yards.
Wow.
And like I said, thank God there were people there because no one would ever believe me.
Right. No, I believe it. I mean,
it was one of those wild things that what is it, 1 in a million? You'll see
Probably.
that maybe.
Yeah, just being at the right place at the right time and seeing that, it was just crazy.
I hear stories like that all the time, and it's part of, I always think of it when I go in the woods. I'm like, is today going to be the day that something, like I've heard of people that have been, up on a ridge and hear two bucks fighting, come over, and there's these two giants, locked horns.
Yeah.
It's happened to some friends of mine. I have a lot of friends that have had a lot of experiences, and I'm sure I've had some if I sat back and listened, but most live a pretty boring life when it comes to things like that. It just seems like it's kind of the normal stuff for me. But Tim, I think this has been a really good one. I really appreciate you making the trip over.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it.
I'd love to have you on again and talk more about the land improvement stuff that you do, the habitat fee, how we as hunters can get more involved, with conservation and access, because I think access is one of the bigger talking points for our future in hunting. So I want to thank you for coming over, Mark. Of course, thank you too.
No problem.
And I think we'll do this again.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, we'll catch you on
We
the next
hardly even scratched the surface of some of the foolish stories over the years.
Well, listen, this stuff's mobile. I can drive over. I want to get a picture of that cart in the barn and the processing, so we can do it again.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool.
No one can save you. You better